We're losing so many kids to suicide for simply feeling like they don't belong.
This is absolutely critical. Parents are feeling overwhelmed and they feel like they do not know what to do.
The hardest thing for us was that he would turn up to work, make, thousands of kids in homes laugh on TV, and then he would come home and we wouldn't see him for 2 days.
I remember competing for Eurovision Australia Decides and just being backstage with my wife and just so I have to cry and just weeping in her arms.
Just having that initial connection, I then walk away and go, oh wow, I feel so much better. It's like a burden's lifted just in a period of minutes.
In a family that was, heavily entrenched in sport, treating our mental health and mental fitness as important as physical fitness.
The challenge is we are existing in an ever-increasing uncertain world, right? It's not weak to feel, it's human to feel.
And I think it's important too, whilst in that space, that it's not your duty to necessarily go down the whirlpool with someone as well.
Yeah, true.
Lean in, recognise it's your right, your human right to not suffer in silence. Feel hopeful because the right strategies will absolutely save lives.
The fact that you've even asked shows you care, and that's enough.
Yeah.
That's enough.
This has been absolutely awesome from everyone here around how to have these conversations, because I know that a lot of people are wanting to have them, but it's just the skills to feel empowered to have them safely.
You are worth it and you are helpable.
Yama Yama, Mitch Tambo here. I'm a proud Gamilaroi man and it's an honour to be a part of No Talk Day. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my utmost respects to the First Peoples of this beautiful place in which we gather today to discuss about mental health and much needed topics. The Boonwurrung people, Boonwurrung people, and extend that out to the Wurundjeri people and all Woiwurrung people. Thank you for having us here on your beautiful country. I'd like to acknowledge you as the first mothers, fathers, doctors, lawkeepers, agriculturalists, and much, much more, whose law transcends into the Wadumbull, the Milky Way, flows through the Bugeye, the waterways, and Yulegis dances across this beautiful country. I'd also like to acknowledge that their ancestors, when we are still, Mayli, whispered to our Gidu, our heart and spirit. Thank you so much for having us all.
Hello and welcome to Triple M's No Talk Day, second annual Courageous Talk Roundtable. I'm Sean Goff, National Project Manager for Triple M's No Talk Day, our initiative focusing on men's mental health, now in its 5th year. We have an esteemed and impressive panel assembled to contribute to this year's discussion. But firstly, I'd like to thank Mitch Tambo for honouring us today with his acknowledgement of country. Mitch is a proud Gamilaroi man. A qualified social worker, Mitch is a First Nations entertainer, blending traditional Aboriginal sounds and language with electrifying pop to create his own unique sound. You might be familiar with his version of John Farnham's You're the Voice in traditional Gamilaroi language. Mitch is an ambassador for UNICEF Australia. He's also the voice and ambassador for the National Radio Community's Mental Health You're the Voice campaign. Mitch is always open to sharing his journey and is committed to talking openly to his lived experience as a proud Aboriginal man, son, husband, father, stepfather and friend in the hope that he can help others with their own journey of healing. Thanks for being here, Mitch.
Thanks for having me.
Chelsea Frawley is a passionate mental health advocate. She's also the daughter of Danny Spud Frawley. Chelsea's the partnership manager of the Danny Frawley Centre at the St Kilda Football Club, a centre focusing on building mental fitness in the community. She's also a driving force behind St Kilda's annual match for mental health, Spud's Game. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thanks so much, Sean.
Andrea Cole has worked at Southern Cross, Austereo and Triple M for 38 years. She's a technical production manager and this year, Andrea celebrates her 20th anniversary of gender transitioning. Congratulations, Andrea.
Thanks, Sean.
It's wonderful to have you here. Dr. Jodie Lowinger is an award-winning clinical psychologist. She's an anxiety, resilience and mindset expert. A mental health thought leader, she trained at Harvard University. She's a TEDx speaker and best-selling author of the Mind Strength Method. Jodie is founder of the Anxiety Clinic and founder CEO of Mind Strength Peak Performance Consultancy. She's also the creator and host of the podcast Where To From Here. Dr. Jodie, welcome.
Great to be here, thank you.
Well, can I start with you, Dr. Jodie?
Sure.
We're here today to talk about mental health and how we take care of our mental health, own our own mental health. But can I get an understanding from you, the foundations, what are the foundations of mental health, first of all?
Yeah, the foundations are things that really tap into all of us as human beings. So they're really fundamental in terms of the mind-body connection. So things like movement and things like connection, what we're doing right here today, getting good sleep, drinking water, eating good nutrition, but also tapping into what we need as human beings, things like kindness, gratitude, and just respecting the sense of overall well-being. So aligning to the things that are important to us, that help us to flourish and thrive, our values. But what is really important about those foundation stones is consistency is even more important than quantity. I like to say 2 minutes is better than no minutes. So if we can tap into embracing imperfection and just lean in, we move away from that, I've got to be perfect in order to be good enough. I've got to have all in order to be good enough. No, we want to just jump in and do something. And that's really how we can respect our mental health for all of us.
So when you talk about consistency, do you mean spending time on your mental health actively each day? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Doing something consistent every day, small steps in the right direction. And it's about building awareness, creating that space to think about, what do I need? What works for me? And I use the word movement rather than exercise because it doesn't even matter if you walk to the corner of your block and back. It's about what works for you. What are the community groups that work for you? And so it's really being empowered about thinking, what is something that works for me? And standing up to that sense of what other people are doing in order to be good enough, and really thinking doing something is what it's all about.
Chelsea, can I ask you, what do you do regularly for your mental health? What are some of the things?
That's a good question. I think growing up in a family that was, heavily entrenched in sport, our mental health was kind of likened to physical fitness. So treating our mental health and mental fitness as important as physical fitness. So whether it's connecting with friends, constantly, moving our body, I feel is something that I do daily to work on my mental fitness. But being able to check in and have regular check-ins with my friends is also super important and something that I think can help immensely.
Yeah, connection is the key, isn't it? It's just staying connected.
Absolutely. I mean, we are tribal beings.
Yeah.
We're biological beings living in this technologically driven world. We got to bring it back to fundamentals and keep it simple.
Yeah.
Move away from all of these complicated things and just really it's the fundamentals that make a big difference. So people to feel positive and empowered and hopeful that we can all really do stuff that keeps us feeling better in our lives.
Mitch, through the pandemic, I noticed that you actively stayed connected with your Facebook series Tambo Talks. So tell me, can you talk to us a little bit about that? So what was the catalyst for that, and what do you do on a daily basis to look after your mental health? Yeah, sure.
Me, like every other artist around the world during the pandemic, started a podcast. But I wanted mine to be, not that everyone's wasn't, but I really was purposeful in the intent behind doing it if I was going to do it. So I really wanted to create an online community that was geared towards just celebrating and empowering one another to just, keep pressing on and feel empowered to just get through everyday obstacles in life and hurdles that we may face. So I just started interviewing other artists and other people in the entertainment business, and it just started to, snowball and grow, and just went from one series to another, and we created this incredible online community that was just based on just literally, just uplifting and empowering one another, and just to hear someone's story, not from all the glitz and glamour, but hear a bit about what they actually had to go through and face to, rise up and wake up the next day and press on and pursue their dreams and vision.
Yeah, so you're really big about moving forward and staying positive, I've noticed, and we talked earlier about the emu feathers and the role the emu has in your totem, and they don't take backward steps. So how does that look for you each day in terms of, is there something you do on a daily basis for your mental health?
I think the older I get, or as time goes on, especially having kids and getting married, it becomes more of a priority because you realise the way that you wake up each day is a flow-on effect to your own kids and wife and household, and you waking up in a bad mood can set the whole tone for everyone.
Yeah.
So I've just really become really passionate about pursuing my own healing and hitting my own transgenerational trauma or traumas or unrest, just hitting it front on and just dealing with it and not being scared to cry and just unravel whatever it is I need to unravel. So I've been on quite a bit of a journey the last 12 months of doing that.
Yeah.
And in particular, what I realised is I was very fitness orientated, and I thought that was enough, just going to the gym and getting it done. But really that was just a part of my routine because it was just a part of being successful. So I decided, what can I do to make my inner child happy? What's something that I'd really like to do?
Yeah, right.
So I realised that within my own grief of losing my dad, surfing was one of the things that we shared, and I'd put that by the wayside, and my wife said, I think you need to get your dad's boards and get out in the water. So I did that, and it snowballed into this, I think I'm going to get a surfboard and do what like the 12-year-old version of me just wanted to do, just go for a surf and be with his dad. So I've made it a priority now to just go for a surf and get in the salt water, and I feel like that's an actual sort of nourishing and a healing and a bit of a letting go of what I've just been through that week or day, where I think going to the gym is just more of I just got to be fit for what I do, as opposed to this is actually nurturing my spirit and making me actually feel refreshed and reset.
That's amazing. Thank you. That's awesome. Andrea? Now, tell me about your mental fitness, your mental resilience, and how you contribute on a daily or regular basis to it.
Well, on a small level, I live on the outskirts of Melbourne, and getting outside's a big thing. On a grander scale, going camping or what have you, but just around the garden, getting outside in the morning, just the process of walking to the car and not going straight to the car and taking off, but just taking in the trees around. The drive home, a lot of people say, oh, how do you handle living that far out? But it's calming just to be able to drive out, crossing the Yarra.
Because what's your commute? How far?
Oh, it varies, hour to an hour and a half. So
you can
it's not terrible,
2 to 3 hours in the car each day.
lots of nice trees and stuff. But yeah, through COVID and all the lockdowns, I share a house, and we commented that, gee, it's great to be able to live out here. It just has a calming effect in itself. I guess the other aspect is connection, having someone who knows you and know you can always share. Someone when you may not even feel like you need to share, and just that walk in and, what's up? Something's wrong. And sometimes I'm not even aware of it, but it might be just something that's triggered during this, often triggering things, especially for trans people at the moment, and just someone who you can share with, and no judgment, just never judgment, just always. That's really grounding for me.
And have you, over your, at least the last 20 years since your transitioning, how is looking after your mental health sort of evolved for you?
Well, there's a lot of different stages when I look back over the 20 years, over life, really. So, yeah, there's obviously was the initial, and I won't go through all the transition stuff, but that was an incredibly intense time. But then as things evolve and you work your way through the particular issue that I was dealing with, things pass, and you get to a point where you go, oh, I think I'm living a normal life, right. Which was really gave wonderful feelings. That's not to say there's not, like everyone, things that, as I say, sometimes triggering, or you're just having a bad day. And so I do try and check in. I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight and the like as well at the moment. But yeah, it's not a flat linear thing. Things ebb and flow. Where you go through periods. I go through periods where I'm just feeling a little more challenged, and I will say this year's been something like that. A lot of stuff in the media that's been triggering that for many years I just sort of didn't take a lot of notice of. But it seemed to be catching me a little bit this year.
Poking you a bit more now.
Poking a bit more, so yeah, back to the nature thing. Slightly teary chat with the boss, and I just want to go away put the tent in the car, the sleeping bag, and it does wonders.
Ah, very smart. Jodie, it'd be great if you could guide us through this a little bit, because I want to talk about the causes of deteriorating mental health, and there's lots of them, and I don't pretend to know them all. There's Chelsea's going to be able to speak to a little bit of it today. Anxiety is being one of them, which is where you're an expert. But there's relationships, there's living circumstances. At the moment, the cost of living everywhere in Australia would be, a pressure that a lot of people have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you just, able to summarise maybe some of the causes for us of what contributes to deteriorating mental health?
Yeah, we're a product of our nature, so our genes, and how we're born, and nurture, which is our environment, and some of the environmental factors, some of the traumatic life experiences that we've had. Sometimes drugs and alcohol can create mental health challenges, or sometimes we can turn to drugs and alcohol because of those mental health challenges. Relationship stress, financial stress, as you said. In terms of anxiety, it's really a discomfort with uncertainty. And the challenge is we are existing in an ever-increasing uncertain world, right? So things such as financial uncertainty, or health anxiety, or performance anxiety in this, social media where everybody's presenting their perfect versions of themselves, is creating an intensity. And the fast-paced world that we're in, sometimes I just want to go and hug a tree because it's kind of taking me back to our needs, there are many different causes, but really fundamental is that key message that thankfully we hear more of. It's not weak to feel, it's human to feel. And what I love about what everyone has said is it's about the beauty of self-awareness and listening to whatever your own needs are and responding to that. So moving back into a heart space around what is it that is purposeful action for my own needs.
Yeah, you talk a bit about making anxiety your superpower.
Yeah.
And so that's about understanding, I guess, that it's really individual. Mental health is a really individual thing, and to own the fact that it's individual to you, and if it's different to someone else, that's okay.
Yeah, spot on. And really with anxiety and that superpower element, in my experience over many years with lots of people who have experienced anxiety at various levels of severity, it is that protective instinct, it is our physiological reaction to perceived threat in our environment, but it is caring. It's the care factor. And so we care because we care, it's that sense of empathy, or an analytical mind that wants to keep everyone safe and well. So this is the superpower element of anxiety. And when we can recognise that, it really helps to smash stigma and shame. And that's so important, because when we can smash stigma, when we can do like what we're doing right now to say our common human experience, people will start to talk more and say, I'm not feeling so great right now, I need help. And that's within everybody's right.
Because it's not a normal human urge, is it? And not a normal human reaction to lean into the discomfort of the things that cause us poor mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if people watching or listening to this right now and feel stuck, they know something's not right, they might not acknowledge it right now, but in their heart of hearts they know something's not right. What do they do first? What can they do? What's the first step they can do?
Yeah, lean in, recognise it's your right, your human right to not suffer in silence and to feel hopeful, because with the right strategies, part of which is human connection, most fundamentally, or engaging with a mental health professional or just checking in with a mate, you're going to turn your life around. So do not suffer in silence. When we're experiencing anxiety or low mood, one of the key faces of that, it is basically fight or flight. And oftentimes, particularly men, choose flight because there's a sense of I'm no good, that sense of shame, women as well. And some of the representations of flight is numbing those big emotions. And one of the most insidious representations of that is suicide. It is a flight behaviour. So we stand up to that and feel hopeful because the right strategies will absolutely save lives.
So there are other contributions, some that are beyond or aren't as obvious, and I guess we think back to your dad, Chelsea, and brain trauma.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that your dad's situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was early 2015. He was going through a bit of pressure at work, and he did suffer a mental breakdown, which was probably the beginning of his mental health journey. And I think he was really on the front foot, engaging with psychiatrists, psychologists, had a really great team around him. And I know actually he was working here at Triple M, and the workplace here was so supportive of him taking time out to work through his mental ill health at that time. I think also, you know, he obviously passed in 2019, and I don't want... The hardest thing for our family is that we don't want people to look at his situation and say he had so much support at his fingertips. He had all of the right, supports in place to help him through. It was ultimately post his passing, we found out he did have stage 2 CTE. So it was a brain injury that brought on the mental illness or worked alongside the mental illness that he had, that ultimately, you know, meant that he had an impulsive moment that we can't really take back. But learning from his experience, I think, you know, there's a lot to come out around brain trauma, in specifically CTE and concussion at the moment. And I think we'll just keep finding out how if they need to be treated differently in terms of a mental illness, because they do, you know, happen alongside each other, whether or not the same treatment and support is needed, or we need to differ something here. But, you know, we're at the precipice at the moment. So I think in 10 years we'll know a lot more.
Yeah, you're right. Still very early days, isn't it? What was it? Was it any different sort of at home with your dad, you know, when he was going through that sort of stuff, and even in the, you know, the lead up before you had any idea about his mental health challenges? Yeah,
I think the hardest thing for us was that he would turn up to work, make, you know, thousands of kids in homes laugh.
Yeah, he really
on TV. Did. On radio, he was able to engage with his colleagues and continue doing his job. And then he would come home and we wouldn't see him for 2 days, and
right.
he'd lock himself in his room. So I think the key message there is that, you know, no matter how happy, confident, put together, successful you may think your mates are, there could be something going on that you don't know about behind closed doors, because that was certainly what was happening at our house.
So that's one of the signs, and I think it's probably important for us to touch on today. How do we spot the signs if we're not dealing with, you know, if it's not our own mental health that we feel, you know, an emergency for, or we feel worried about right now? If we're observing it in somebody else, how do we spot the sign? I mean, that's a clear sign in hindsight, isn't it? Yeah, it's actually a great point. I think it is so important from like a personal level to be able to feel safe to come out and ask for help. But I think the key thing that we need to start doing now is capacity building the community around to be able to spot the signs in your mates. So the onus isn't on them and the burden isn't on them to kind of reach out. Yeah, it can't be. It can't be all that. That burden can't be just on one person, because they're probably the one that's the most incapable of doing it a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so good now at having that initial conversation around how are you.
Yep.
It's just that next step that we need to kind of build the community around, being able to safely, feel confidently and have a safe conversation around what those next steps are if the answer is I'm not doing great, because I know that's the barrier to a lot of people actually asking the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And trusting your intuition. You know, we sometimes second guess our intuition, and it's filled with wisdom. If you've got a mate or a loved one that's suddenly more agitated, so distress, you know, oftentimes it can present as fight. It can, you know, the fight or flight, anxiety or depression, anger, agitation, aggression, short fuse to frustration.
Yep.
Or, you know, so sometimes that sense of change in personality, or they intensifying of some things, or maybe it's again flight. It's suddenly withdrawing, or otherwise it's not experiencing joy in things that they would have perhaps previously experienced joy around. And
that's a big one, isn't it? I've been in that situation, and it's bizarre is not the right word, but it is definite. Is very definite. When you no longer have the capacity or the ability to experience joy, that's a big red flag to me.
Yeah. So leaning in with that sense of asking the question as a mate, it doesn't have to be the perfect time, but just be true to what your intuition is saying and say, I'm concerned that things that you're not your usual self. I'm here for you, I'm here with you. Is there anything going on? And asking the question, it's that one step that could save a life.
Mitch, what are your experiences? Do you have experiences around this? I mean, just from what you've said already today, you're a much more evolved man than probably the average male because of, you've talked about your last 12 months and how you've processed and looked after your own mental health, but with what we're talking about here, have you had these kind of conversations or noticed things?
For sure. I've had mates overdose and die and people kill themselves and all that kind of thing. And I think it's about just crushing the stigma of where we come from, that, she'll be right. And just being able to ring up, and you don't have to even be sensitive about it. Just ring up and go, hey, brother, what's going on?
Love it.
There's something different there today. You all right or what? I don't think we have to be passive and tiptoe around, because sometimes that sends someone in hiding when you come on too gentle and too caring with some of our more butcher fellas, if you like, So I think it's just about approaching it as per the relationship you've built with someone. If it's a gentle one, then you approach it that way. But if it's very much just like that brotherhood and it's all tough or whatever, then you just approach it and just be straight up. But I think it's about not brushing the little signs, because there are little signs that I think often we just go, he's right, he'll get over it. But he won't get over it. And he needs someone to just ring up, or she needs someone to ring up and just go, hey, I noticed today, like in that laugh or something, you shot like a death stare or something. There was something different. That time when you like walk away and you go, that was weird. Like, that's not like them. And it could just be even that like 1 second mannerism, but it makes you, back to what you said about intuition, it just makes you feel a bit funny in the tummy. You're just like, that's weird.
Yeah.
And I think if you leave the conversation and there's a question mark, then that's enough to send a message or a call.
Yeah.
I think,
So have you had, on the flip side of, you mentioned that you've had friends who have passed away or have died by suicide. On the flip side, have there been some other stories where you've had that conversation and it's led to someone taking care of their mental health and finding help?
Yeah, look, I have just through passing and meeting people, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me through my music and be like, I was on the brink of killing myself, or I was in the fight of my life this year, and just your message in that song and how it made me feel, I just had it on repeat the whole year and you've saved my life. I've had stuff like that. Or people just watching interviews or things that you put out. But I've had people around me that are relatively close just not just reach out dramatically, just like it could have happened to them a couple of years ago and they just all of a sudden felt in their journey to reach out and go, hey, that thing you said or whatever, it got me through in that brief moment, But I've had moments with mate, and I think it's important too, whilst in that space, that it's not your duty to necessarily go down the whirlpool with someone as well.
Yeah, true.
If someone is suffering and they're at that crossroad and they're making really poor choices, you have a life and a plan and a purpose for your own life, and you've got to make the right decisions to make sure you have a great, successful life. And I've been at that crossroad where I've ended the friendship and we were like incredibly close to the max, and many years later had a phone call to just say, look, I'm really proud of you, but things had gone the opposite way for them, and thankfully we had the opportunity to tell each, I love you, my brother, and all that kind of thing, and within a month they were gone. And it made me realise the two things, like on one side of the coin, it's like, damn, if only I didn't end the friendship, maybe I could have stuck in there and maybe help you made some more informed choices. But on the other side, I can see that crossroad and I was like, well, if I went that way, that could have been me too. So I think it's an interesting subject, and it's about equipping and empowering people to offer help and offer a solution and be aware of the resources that's out there, but it's not necessarily your position to carry that weight or that burden either, because you have to protect your own mental health and where you want to go in life. So it's interesting, and I feel like the more that we open up the conversation, equip the next generation and all of our generations, because it's only really new, this topic, and opening it right up, the more that we can save lives and empower other people to get on and have the best life they deserve as well.
That's a great point. I was going to ask you about how do we navigate that type of specific situation Mitch is just talking about?
Yeah, I love what you said. It is really about empowering towards action through open-ended questions with your end goal in mind. So, it's starting off leaning into that transparent conversation, keeping it real and saying, I'm concerned, you're not your normal self. What's going on? And then what do you think about, or how do you feel about getting some help? Because there's great help out there. And so it's guiding towards resources and keeping that communication going. What I think is really important is helping society to recognise that the tools will help, the people will help, the right therapists. There's loads of stuff out there now to help people. So when we're feeling crap, when we're feeling low mood or anxious, sometimes that sense of I'm not worth it can kick in, or that sense of I'm flawed, I'm unfixable. And we have to smash those messages and say we are all helpable as human beings. No matter how severe the mental health challenges are, you are worth it and you are helpable. I don't even say treatable, I'm a clinical psychologist that is very rare to use the word treatment or use the word disorder, because this is about our common human experience and the tools will make a difference.
Okay, so someone is exactly where you're saying that it's the severest right now. Is the GP their first step necessarily?
Brilliant first step,
I can't see a way out.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm at the lowest I've ever been. I'm not sure what's down the track for me.
Yeah.
Is the GP the first step?
GP is a great step, a great first step. Crisis line, there are so many helplines that are trained to help people to feel comfortable. Any step is a great first step. Reach out to a mate, reach out to a loved one.
And I think it's important to recognise too that whilst the clinical route is the most preferred, because that's what we've all been conditioned to believe and accustomed to, that also linking people up with their community groups is very powerful, because in my community and many communities, from a historical standpoint, the GP is the last person someone wants to go to discuss that stuff.
Right, okay.
But linking back up with community, family, back on country, or that route could be in a great point just to feel that sense of connectiveness, belonging. It might even be directed at my community. It could be someone from a refugee background that, English is a really hard language to still get their head around. So a GP, they're not going to understand. There's language barriers. You can't get a translator. So you might link them back up with, their community within Melbourne, where they can see people in there that can refer them to the right pathway. So I feel like mental health's diverse, and how you treat it, it's very diverse, and that all mediums are beneficial dependent upon that person. And I think the more that we recognise the diversity and complexity in it, and that it is, like we said before, it's to the individual, we can make better informed choices to really save lives and empower people to, wake up tomorrow and fight another day.
And I think that the power of prevention is really important as well. We're talking about sort of the prickly end, but prevention is key, and wellbeing strategies are going to make such a wonderful difference. So don't wait until you're feeling crap. Don't wait until it's really bad. The tools that I use in a high performance context are the same tools that I use in a clinical context. It's about mastering your mindset. It's about that mind-body connection, exercise and movement, connecting with your tribe, with your community, and just not waiting until it's that really prickly end.
That feels like a wonderful point that you make, because that's about habit forming, right? And having good habits.
Yeah.
You talked about, Chelsea, you talk about community involvement through sport, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're a big believer in that.
At the Danny Spud Centre, we really focus on building mental fitness. We work with the St Kilda Football Club and know that they have awesome specialists from a high performance mindfulness point of view. So we want to be able to kind of grab that knowledge and democratise it across all of community sport. And I think it's so important to kind of focus on, take a look at the system. When we're talking about mental ill health, we're always looking at that right-hand side of the continuum, which is, an extreme need of a clinical intervention. But I think the important thing is to educate people that it starts a lot before that. If you're able to teach yourself mindfulness, if that's your choice, or gratitude, all of these early intervention mental fitness building activities, you're able to better cope with life's ups and downs. So, going through grief is one of them that if you know these skills before you actually go through that, it'll help you cope a lot better and mean that you're less likely to need clinical intervention at the other end. I'm not a psychologist.
No, but you said that absolutely magnificently, and it's spot on. Absolutely.
And I feel like we live in a world right now where youth in particular are just really craving belonging and identity. And they live in a world where I think identity is broken up and becomes so multifaceted. And with online social media and things like that, people are really struggling to really get a grasp of, okay, this is where I belong. This is where and I know in our community, coming from stolen generation and things where everything's become just fractured, trying to piece that together to give youth that this is who you are and this is what you connect to, this is your stories. All you have to do is look up into the stars whenever you feel alone and look at that story, and you know that wherever you go, you're never alone. And so it's how can we link up our young people and give them a really strong sense of identity and belonging, and not just culturally. It could be, in their sexual orientation or religion or beliefs or values, but being able to link them up so that they have somewhat of a strong foundation. Because we already know that through life, we're going to go through all of these ups and downs. But if you can grab onto one thing that makes your foundation nice and sturdy, you've got, a bit more hope and a bit more power to draw from, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
Andrea?
Yeah, because I spend a lot of after transition, a lot of time just being very closed, not wanting to talk about it.
That's a natural human reaction, isn't it? Just to
It is.
hole up, cut ourselves off.
And seeing all the different groups in society, you talk about how we're dividing the pie down into smaller and smaller things, and I was getting a little bit more, where do I fit in? I don't talk about this. And then it's only more recently that I did start talking about it, and there was a really common reaction from people saying, I've so wanted to ask you things, but I thought it's private and I won't ask. It's private, just what we were talking about before. And from my side, I'd be almost catastrophising, if I open up and talk about something, I'm going to have to make it this great, big, huge thing, and I don't really know you that well, and so you don't talk at all. But once you give that very small little invitation that, hey, it's okay to talk about whatever it might be that's troubling you, and it can be pretty much anything, then the other person invariably accepts that invitation pretty readily, and they, can I? And you then find you don't need the great, huge conversations. In many instances you might, and that might lead on to other avenues. But just having that initial connection, I then walk away and go, oh, wow, I feel so much better. It's like a burden's lifted just in a period of minutes. Other times, yes, it's important to have the really hard conversations, and
It's almost like a permission, isn't it?
it's absolutely a permission, and it can be a bit of a two-way juggle between you go first, no, I go first, which...
But Mitch, what you were saying a little earlier is sometimes you can't be polite and wait for permission in some areas. You need to step into that breach if you're seeing someone who needs some help to, don't take that gently approach. But so long as you're authentic in your approach.
Yeah, I think it's just being authentic and letting that person really feel that you're really concerned.
Yeah.
But I don't mean be rude and abrupt. I just mean if you and your mate or whoever have got that relationship, well then you navigate that relationship like that. You know, whatever's going to maybe get through and have that impact. Because at the end of the day, you're literally checking in to potentially save someone's life. It's not like it's just a little...
Here's a life vest if you want it.
Yeah, here's a life vest or here's a chat or, you know, and that's the thing is, you know, in the Mental Health You're the Voice campaign, the big conversation was the power in your voice and the power of opening up the conversation, because you can be going, and I've done it too, you're going through something and you internalise and it feels like it's Mount Everest, and then you have a 5-minute conversation and it's just a little speed hump down the main street, you know. Just that 5-minute conversation is enough to let you know that, yeah, people go through it or they understand or empathise with you, or you just get off your chest and like, oh, okay, moving on, it's all good, you know. But when you internalise, it can just grow rapidly, and then all of a sudden you feel like there's no way out. And so just to have that, someone just go, are you all right? And just allow for that, even 30 seconds, go, no, I'm not, I'm having the worst day, could save a life. That's the reality.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Can I talk about, you know, you being an Aboriginal man, and what's it like for you is that stuff that on top of, do you feel like it's that stuff that you deal with on top of normal everyday mental health struggles? Is that compounded for you? I
think like my journey as an Aboriginal man is my journey, and I say that before I speak because it's been very complex, because on one hand my skin colour is white, and I get perceived like, you know, I've been to Spain and people try and speak to me in Spanish, go to Italy, tourists come up ask me directions in Italian, I go to the Middle East, I get interrogated with a gun at me thinking, why am I crossing into this border, because I'm from here, and, you know, some people think I'm Aboriginal, some people, you know, so it's very complex. So I spent a lot of years feeling somewhat trapped in my own body, because in the inside of me, I'm just black, and I'm like this, I feel like I'm this, you know, warrior, this cultural man. But on the outside, I just look like your normal, stereotypical Western dude getting around. Not with my headdress. So, you know, it's been interesting, and the way that I've been perceived in many ways online is almost like a mongrel bred dog, and people demand to know, have your papers, hand them over. What's your lineage? You're not this, you're not that. So it can become, you know, on one hand you're left, on the other hand you're right, and then you become, well, where do I fit? And when I went into the mainstream spotlight, that was the first time I'd copped it from both sides of the fence, and that's what really took me out for a while, and I had to then regroup and come back to purpose, and what is it about me that made me want to do this, and why am I doing this, and what's the importance of this? And whilst navigating that, I had so many parents from proud Aboriginal kids that are my colour reach out and go, man, you know, my son is just so in love with you and your music. It's the first time he's ever had anyone that looks like him be proud of his culture like he is. Please just keep doing what you're doing. So it's been a really complex journey. And within that journey, I also realised the transgenerational trauma that I carried, and how that's a real thing, and how that can impact your mental health. And I remember competing for Eurovision Australia Decides, and just being backstage with my wife, and just I'm sorry, I have to cry, and just weeping in her arms, because I could just feel like one of my grandmothers was next to me. And I just felt this surgence of this deep pain come up, and that was only birthed through the pressures of what I was going through online. And so it's been a really interesting journey. And I guess in a nutshell, without confusing anyone further, because it's quite a confusing sort of journey, you've just got to come back to who you are and what you believe in, and be unapologetic about that. And I realised really quickly that, you know, when I was a young fellow, a traditional dancer, painted up in a lap, no one in my community would ever question my Aboriginality, nothing. But because I decided to step out and be myself in my entirety, wear my headdress, my cultural wear, but also mix that with fashion and the Western realm, all of a sudden people start to question that. But I was like, I have to be authentic to myself, because there's so many kids out there, not just from my community, but all communities, limping around like gangsters and acting a certain way, where it's like, you can actually be proudly who you are and where you come from, and you can rock your cultural headdress, or you can be an Islamic rapper with your hijab on, or, you know, we don't have to forsake elements of ourselves to fit in a mainstream construct. And I feel like the more that we celebrate that and showcase that, in actual fact, the more lives we save, because we're losing so many kids to suicide for simply feeling like they don't belong. And so I've wore a lot of the knives in the back and arrows to the heart, so to speak, to press on, because I really believe in carrying my culture and my ancestry, and I believe that my ancestors have called me to walk in this and do this. And through that journey, I've realised the flow-on effect. And I've been in, done festivals and had lines for like 40 minutes with a grandparent with their grandchild, just wait. And I'd come up and I'd go to say hello to the little fellow, and it's actually the grandparent that's waited. And that's the first time in my whole life I felt safe to openly say I'm Aboriginal.
Yeah.
Just from that visibility. And I really realised, and it made me reflect and go, yeah, well, when I grew up, all I really looked to was Yothi Yindi, and Yothi Yindi didn't look like me, but they were proud, they were deadly, they were out there. Like, that's, wow, incredible. But now I realise the power in my visibility and how I look, because today us as Aboriginal people and all people from all walks of life are all different shades, sizes and colours, and I think the more we just get out there and be ourselves, the better, because the reality is if we don't, we are losing poor kids to suicide and their mental health, you know.
So having your own compass, I subscribe so strongly to that. I think it's really important because, you know, the definition of a compass is to show you where you are.
Absolutely.
No matter what situation if you're lost, then at least a compass is going to help you find your way back.
Totally.
So let's talk about our kids. So they're going to be the women and the men of tomorrow. How do we coach them? How do we help them with mental health now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jodie?
Yeah,
You're a mum?
I'm a mum of 3, and I do a lot of work with parents and kids and teens. And it is, again, that word empowerment. And there's lots that we can talk to there. I just want to come back to what Mitch was saying just for 1 second, in terms of if we bring it to a level that can help everybody, and if we think about a mindset hack, it's about recognising judgment as a really unhelpful mental process. So you take it out of the content and bring it back to a mindset level and start to notice, am I in judgment? And sometimes it's self-judgment, I'm not good enough, or sometimes it's judgment of others. And like what you were talking to before was really about, you took yourself out of self-judgment, and that allowed you to open up that beautiful conversation and connection. And you've taken yourself out of judgment, and it allows you to bring it back to your heart space and connect in such a magnificent, authentic way, all of us. But talking about parents, this is absolutely critical. Parents are feeling overwhelmed, and they feel like they do not know what to do. And so I love to help parents to feel empowered with the tools to help themselves, because what's happening now is, with technology right from the very beginning, we're missing our fundamentals of interpersonal connection as social beings. And so emotional intelligence allows us, when we build these tools, it allows us to build empathy for understanding where each other's coming from. So parents, to teach how parents can be emotion coaches is having conversations around emotions. It might even be watching a TV program, let's say Bluey or something else. I'll give a plug to Bluey, because it brings up a lot of content around emotions. And so it's parents empowering their kids to say, how do you think Bluey's feeling right now? And, you know, he might be feeling frustrated. Is he feeling a little bit frustrated or a lot frustrated? And opening up the dialogue around how they were feeling on any particular day as emotion coaches, but leaning into these opportunities to connect. It might be at bedtime, it might be, driving our kids to sport. There are many ways parents can make a difference. There's lots of practical tools, but ultimately, again, it's the power of authentic connection, building a concept around emotions and a language around emotions will help our kids and teens to have more emotional regulation and feel safe ultimately.
So being able to help them with the language around emotion, helping them label it through natural conversations.
Yes, and being role models of resilience is about saying, I've had a really tough day. And this is what I've done to look after myself. So it's not about saying, I'm a robot as a parent, I've got all of my act together. No, let's keep it real with our kids. I was worried, but I know that worry isn't a helpful mental process. Worry just leads to more worry. I'm going to move from worry into problem solving and action planning around what's in my control as another mindset hack, but leading by example and recognising you can't pour from an empty glass. As parents, it's our right to look after ourselves.
Yep.
Oftentimes loving parents or loving humans give and give outwards. Got to give inwards in order to be able to help our loved ones.
Mitch, what do you do with your kids?
Yeah, I think like really simply, we've made it a priority to communicate.
Yep.
And as uncomfortable as it can be as parents, the best thing to do is communicate, and that's to talk about everything and really carry the approach that if I don't do it, someone else will do it, and I don't know how they will explain that and how it might go down. So we've been really open and honest with our kids, and provided a space where we'll catch up. It mightn't be weekly, or once a month, and sit at the table and really, reflect and debrief on what's just happened in the last month, have a chat, catch up, or if we see a change in one of the girls, we don't wait. We call the kids to the table and we just have a conversation. Like, yeah, well, is everything all right? What's going on? You said, we've made it a real effort to just communicate, and that's all I can really bring it back to. And
did it take a while?
Yeah,
for that to work?
I think it does. I think it takes a while for the kids to go, oh, they're for real, and we can talk here, and we're actually not going to get grounded or whatever for really opening up, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think also identifying their strengths. Like, if someone's not a strong communicator but they're a great writer, just go, hey, there's obviously something going on. I'm going to leave you alone for an hour. I want you to just write it down and tell me what's going on, and you just tell me what you want, and I'll read it. Just finding their strength, but communication's been great, I think, for us. And also we've implemented things where, like I've said things like, if you ever do something silly and I'd go off over it and you're stranded and your friends aren't doing too well, just call me. I don't need to know anything, and I'll pick you all up and bring you home, and we'll deal with it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You just always know that you can call us.
That's trust.
Yeah, building trust. And also, if their mum, they'll go, I said, look, if something's really gone down and you need advice and you're going to get it, then the code is you say to mum, look, mum, I just need to talk to you as a friend for a minute. Is that all right?
Yeah.
And you know that you're not going to get in trouble, but we know it's serious, but we'll sort it out and deal with it all later.
That's a great plan.
So we've kind of come up with those strategies. And it's been great because, like, as you said, it's trust, and the girls know that they can confide and talk in us and it's not going to go anywhere, and they also know that we're going to do our best to find a resolution and they're going to be okay and everything will work out, sort of thing. Yeah.
You talked about communication a little earlier, about, walking through the door and that someone knowing that something's not quite right even if you don't.
Yeah, people get good at reading you. They do, and particularly the people who know you well. But sometimes it's the people who you don't know so well as well. People can be too close, I think, sometimes.
Yep.
And I think it's all right to carry, or create your own rituals or customs from your own belief systems or culture into it. Like for us, if we feel like, we've just been through a bit of a rough patch, then we'll reset and we'll go and we'll do a smoking ceremony. And we know that in that ritual or in that tradition that it's all left there and it's a reset, and we just move on from there. And
that's with your family?
Yeah, we'll just get everyone together in the backyard or whatever, and sometimes, you can write down whatever it is and let it go in that fire and just let it go, or just bathe yourself in that smoke and just be together and know that you're supported, you're not alone, there's no judgment, and once this smoke washes over you, it's gone and it's a new chapter.
Writing can be a huge
Writing
thing.
can be massive, yeah.
Sure, my transition takes years, and I've got a box at home locked up that's just loaded with diaries.
Wow.
I'm too terrified to go and read some of them because I know what they represent, but I know they're always there if I want a little reality check of how far I've come.
Yeah, wow.
Beautiful. And sometimes as parents, we think that we have to fix our kids' problems, and it's not about fixing as much as you said, connecting and listening and validating. So just saying, I get it, I hear you, this is really tough right now. And so it's we sometimes can miss that validation piece, which really builds that connection, and then can move to problem solving through empowering, through open-ended questions. And that delivers the message to our kids that we trust their intuition. You know, we're interested in their thoughts around what they can do. But sometimes it is just listening and connecting and not moving to judgment, and not moving to problem solving.
And not thinking you don't have to be an expert.
You don't have to be an expert. It's not our job necessarily to jump to that fixing. It's about validating and say, it's okay, I'm here with you.
Yeah.
Chelsea, two things you said I really loved. One was, is it democratising? Did you use the word democratising?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that word before. It's beautiful. So you talked about democratising, what was it?
The democratising the stuff that we know at the St Kilda Football Club in terms of mindfulness, mental fitness, you know, all of these high performance athletes having access to all of these preventative measures at an elite level, being able to take that knowledge and kind of instill that in the community football clubs around the area. And
the other thing you said was building a community capability.
Yeah.
So they go hand in hand?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the next step. We're definitely seeing that. We go out into many community footy clubs, community sport clubs in the area, and a lot of these conversations are happening. It's just, this has been absolutely awesome from everyone here around how to have these conversations, because I know that a lot of people are wanting to have them, but it's just the skills to feel empowered to have them safely and confidently, because I know I had a question from a president. He's like, I really want to ask these questions, but I just don't want to ask the wrong question and I'm nervous about it. So I think this conversation's been awesome around, you know, empowering people to just ask the question. There's no right or wrong answer, and you're not here as their clinical psychologist. You're here as a support person.
Someone who cares.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact that you've even asked shows you care, and that's enough. That's enough. For trans people, people will often be too scared at the time of transition, particularly, that they're going to get pronouns wrong. I don't know any trans person who gets upset ever with someone who's, if it's coming from a good place in their heart, that's all we ask, certainly all I ever asked.
So I've learned a bit today. There's more than one way to approach this sort of stuff, and fear is a very real part of mental health and seeking help. So seeing a GP can be one solution. Seeking connection in places that you trust that are healthy is another. What else would you say, just sort of as we come to probably the end of our discussion today, what else would you advise, or would you say if I needed mental help with my mental health today, what's another thing I can do? Chelsea, what would you say?
Jodie touched on it. The one that we kind of use at the Danny Spud Centre, we're assist trained, so we're able to intervene in these situations, but that the crisis lines are here for a reason, and they are so well trained. They're accessible. There's chat lines, chat rooms online for many of them, and I think that if you're feeling like you can't afford a GP, or the GP is too hard to get into, that those crisis lines have been, you know, heavily funded for a reason, and they're an awesome resource as a first option for anyone. Yeah, perfect, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all today for your generosity, your courage and your honesty. It really has been a wonderful, I think, discussion, and hopefully people who have listened today or have been watching today have been able to take some real tips and meaningful help out of today. So Dr. Jodie Lowinger, Chelsea Frawley, Mitch Tambo, Andrea Cole, thank you for being here as part of Triple M's No Talk Day.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
So mental health and wellness matters to us all. And Triple M's No Talk Day encourages you to find the time and space for a conversation about mental health, either for yourself or for someone that you care about. And if you found this discussion triggering, or it's raised any issues for you, we encourage you to care for your mental health. If you're feeling alone, if you're struggling, or if you know anyone who's doing it tough, please don't keep it to yourself. Any time is the right time to have a mental health conversation. You can make an appointment with your GP, seek connection with someone that you trust, or you can contact Beyond Blue anytime on 1300 224 636 or the First Nations support line on 13 92 76. You can also help Beyond Blue continue their crucial life-saving work through either fundraising, or you can donate anytime at beyondblue.org.au. Look, and most importantly, it's okay to not be okay. If you found this discussion valuable, I encourage you to check out last year's inaugural Triple M No Talk Day Courageous Talk Roundtable. The link is in the description, or you can search it on YouTube. Thanks for watching.